Hello, everyone. Welcome to WCI's today's event. Our event today is called Building Sensitivity Towards Survivors' Narratives, the Approach That Matters. The 16 Days of Activism Against Violence Against Women and Girls is an international campaign that takes place each year. It starts on November 25th, the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, and goes on until 10th of December, the Human Rights Day. It was originated by activists as the first Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991, and this year marks its 30th anniversary. Our event today is a small gesture commemorating this movement that hopes to eliminate gender based violence by the year 2030. Our panelists for today are Rafiat Rashid Mithila. Mithila is a development worker, actress, and a PhD researcher from Bangladesh. She has extensive experience in working on women and children's rights in Bangladesh and countries in East and West Africa. Currently, she is working as the head of early childhood development in BRAC International and pursuing her PhD in early childhood education in the University of Geneva in Switzerland. We have Marjia Sriti, who is a director of the nonprofit organization Bangladesh Academy of Fine Arts BAFA in New York. Her work includes facilitating performing arts training, community engagement programs, philanthropic efforts, and research. She is currently a practicing mental health therapist, training in New York. A unique aspect of her professional journey has been providing bilingual therapeutic treatment to the Bangladeshi immigrant diaspora. We have Somaya El Susi, a poet and writer from Gaza, Palestine. She has published 4 books of poetry in Arabic, and her 5th book has also been translated into Swedish and Norwegian. She has been working as a researcher in social affairs in Gaza, specializing in matters such as women's status, gender equality, and human rights. We have Adriana Bitice. She is a clinical psychologist working as project manager at Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims since 2012. Her entire career has been dedicated to providing rehabilitation services to asylum seekers, refugees, returnees, internally displaced persons, and stateless persons. Gender based violence became a really important component of the program soon after it started. The program has addressed gender based violence among returned populations who mostly belong to Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian communities, which are marginalized and underprivileged throughout the country. According to the latest estimates, nearly 1 in 3 women aged 15 years and older around the world have been subjected to physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner, non partner, or both, at least once in their lifetime, indicating that levels of violence against women and girls have remained largely unchanged over the last decade. These numbers do not even reflect the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and would be even higher if they included the full continuum of violence that affect women and girls, including sexual harassment, violence in digital context, harmful practices, and sexual exploitation. So, Mithila, let me start with you. You have extensive experience working in with women and girls in Bangladesh as well as African countries. Our experience, a challenge in eliminating gender-based violence remains with the fact that we often don't even recognize gender-based violence for what it is, and part of that sometimes lies in the culture. Sometimes it is about recognizing it. Sometimes it is due to the bias that the survivors face when they come out and disclose the violence that they're facing into their day-to-day life. Would you like to share a little bit of their experience on that subject?
I think if I primarily focus on gender-based violence in the context of Bangladesh, and I have seen similarities in countries in Africa as well, since I have worked with adolescent girls and young women. Um, so the first thing is normalizing um, gender-based violence culturally, and making women feel like um, it, it's not, I mean, there are, the society or the family, the society primarily decides on the degree of violence, and they sort of, that's how normalizes, like, it's just a slap, so it's not violence. And they also, like, there are phrases which sort of says, it normalizes gender-based violence by saying, um, after all, it's your husband. I mean, don't provoke him. Try to cope, try to adjust. Don't do anything that makes him lose his temper. It's just about the temper. I mean, um, men can do it. It's just a slap. Oh, of course you did something, that's why he did that. So a lot of, first of all, culturally we try to normalize gender-based violence. Secondly, I think women who are facing gender-based violence, they don't come out and share it with other people, because even if they identify, if they realize, and even if it is a severe form of gender-based violence, they don't come out because of victim blaming. It's very common in the context of Bangladesh, and I would say the entire Indian subcontinent, as well as I've seen the same thing in Africa, that it's always people try to find fault in women, like whatever they were wearing, maybe it's their behavior, maybe they were out very late at night. So it's primarily women's fault, that they may have behaved or in such a way, or they may have, like, they took some actions in such a way that provoked men to get into gender-based violence. So and women are, they I mean, they are always, there's this shame and blame game and sort of shaming that happens when women try to share, especially if we're, I mean, we're talking about, if we're talking about rape or like severe form of sexual violence. um, it's the women who who are ashamed to come out and share their experience, because that's also something that society normalizes, that if you get raped, you should be ashamed of it. If you get sexually harassed, you should be ashamed of it. So I think that's also another thing, that the shaming, blaming, that happens severely towards women, if they want to come out and share about their experience of gender-based violence. And thirdly, I think also the lack of implementation of laws, um, and lack of support system, because women don't know. I have seen that women don't know, even like educated women, they don't know where to go, how to seek support. They're scared of the judicial system, they're scared of the police, they're scared of dealing with lawyers. They don't know where to go, what to do, they don't know about the laws. So there is a huge gap over there in terms of implementation of whatever laws we have, or also in terms of lack of awareness um, for women. Like, they don't know where to go, who to reach out, and that's why, since they don't know much about it, they get scared. And of course, I have seen, like, women being harassed by the lawyers, by the police force. So the entire, I think it's the social, but at the same time, the entire system, that can be judicial system, or they are not supportive of women, coming out and sharing. So I think the support system, there's also lack of support system all over, at the family level, at the you know the societal level, at the policy level, everywhere. So yeah, I mean that's what I would like to um, share, that there are these three things are that I would say the core things that we need to maybe put much focus on. The firstly, the normalizing violence. Um, Secondly, the victim blaming. It's shaming and blaming the victims. And thirdly, the lack of awareness from the survivor side or from the victim side, and also the lack of implementation of laws. Yeah, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mithila. We will now go to Somaya. Somaya, you have been working in Gaza and doing your research on Palestinian women. We often hear about the issues related to Arab people in general, but we rarely hear about the violence that is being committed against the Arab women by Arab men themselves within their family. Would you like to share their status, your experience related to that, about the Arab women's status?
Hi. I think you are totally right because there haven't been a lot statistics or a lot of people talking about what's happening inside. They are talking about the general everyday news, especially I mean in Gaza and Palestine, because the war situation is over everything. So what's happening inside the society is totally hidden. I think I can talk about the Arabic countries, the Arabian countries, and especially Gaza. In general, a lot of women, almost all of them, have suffered from this violence inside the family, from the husband, the brothers, the father. Mainly in Gaza, the last 2 years, I didn't have time to have statistics, but the last 2 years during the COVID-19, a lot of men forced to stay at home. So they spend more time inside the family. So they are stressed. They express their stress against the women, the children, the girls. So also there have been some cases of murder, killing some women or young girls under the name of honor, or sometimes you just don't know why. They said, okay, we find some girl, 16 years old, died and buried somewhere, and they don't give any reason for this. And then you find this case is nobody will talk about it. But if you dig inside what's happening in, this girl might have, for example, an innocent relation with somebody, and this is not acceptable at all. So it's really very difficult and hard situation, because as a woman or as a girl, since you grow up, you are raised to be the servant for this man who will be your husband. If not, you are the servant of your brother, your any male in the family. And this is, they don't let you understand that you have rights. For example, if you want to complete your education and you have some brothers in the family, and the family is a little bit poor, they don't have enough money, they will prefer to pay that money for the boys. And the girl should stay at home. She will not have that chance. Even she is very talented, she can be a very good person in the society. No, she will stay at home, buried at home, and the boy will dominate and do a lot of things. Also, as you said, you can't talk about what kind of violence you have, because it's shame. You are shaming your family. We don't have this. They said, we don't have this. There is no abuse in the family. No, nobody will talk directly about it. And if you talk, and I know some cases when they go, for example, to the police, they will say, okay, go home. Everybody do this with his wife. So you have no right to talk or to express what's happening. So a lot of women, I think, just to stay at home. If they know that they have rights, they can start doing something. But in general, there's nothing changing.
Out of the reasons that cause this dynamic between men and women, this imbalance of power to happen. What would you say is the most significant element there? Is it religion? Is it the social order? Is it the legal elements? What would you say is the most, or cultural elements?
Yeah. Mostly it's the misuse of religion because Arabic countries are Muslim, so Islam give a very high respect to women, but the tradition that the people or the society built during the years after Islam, they have make a very bad tradition against women to put them in a high standards, in a low standard, and man in the high standard. So it's more social issues, the society itself, even though it's built by those women, those women are the most important thing in their society, but at the same time, they are the lowest because I think they are afraid because a lot of women, when they get that chance, they can be creative, they can do a lot of great things. So the men or the male domination feel afraid from this. That's maybe why they want just to put them back, to hide their voices.
Um, can the local, we all know that there's a lot of international organizations that are working in the Middle East right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that they should be more aware about the women's status in those area, or are they doing anything at all in
Uh,
this regard?
I would talk about Gaza. I've been in this field for more than 20 years. I've been working with a lot of Women Affairs Association, International Association. They are trying to focus on very, very narrow group. They are not going to the people or to the women who need them. A very few cases they can help, but generally they are like in a high building and the people or the women who need this help will not reach them. So it's like there is a project, it will be done in this area and it will take 6 months. The project is done, no benefit here, no awareness. I don't know, I'm really disappointed with all this because we have a lot of good, intelligent women or girls who need this help, but they don't know where to go. So I think
I can imagine it's very personal for you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Somaya. We'll go to Margia Sriti next. Margia, you've been working as a bilingual therapist in New York. From what we hear, that a lot of the issues that Mithila and Somaya just shared with us, when immigrants come to North America or Europe, they bring those issues with them. What do you see in your practice? Do you see that they bring in the same issues in their life, into their new life, or do they face different issues when it comes to violence, gender-based violence?
So I can speak as a community organizer to this better than as a therapist. But I guess like a lot of like my work overlaps and therefore it'll all be relevant. So I definitely agree with what Mithila said in terms of the character assassination definitely happening. It's totally at the forefront of a lot of this rhetoric, this victim blaming of whether you are a victim of rape, molestation, domestic abuse, so on. And Samaya said important as well, whatever happens within the family, the four walls of the family stays within the family. This makes it very difficult for anyone to actually provide help, right? Because one, already a therapeutic service is already seen as extremely taboo, right? Because the idea or concept of speaking to someone outside of the family is already looked down upon, right? So forget about actually reaching out to public services like domestic abuse hotlines. Now, when it comes to that, right? Reaching out to domestic abuse hotlines, there's what I can say, unfortunately, these are amazing people doing amazing work, but there are some pieces lacking in our country. In our state, I want to say, I don't want to say in our country, in my particular state of New York, there's a lot of people, a lot of undocumented immigrants, whether Bangladeshi or not. right? So when it comes to undocumented folks, if you understand the concept, of course, of like this idea of wanting to protect your family, wanting justice. It's not that the women do not want justice, right? It would be ridiculous to say that they like the situation that they're in, but there are other factors they have to take into consideration. For example, if they themselves are undocumented and they are being threatened to some degree by the spouse or boyfriend or, in-laws, that becomes an issue, right? They do not necessarily want to go to law enforcement. Let's say if the woman is documented, husband is documented, but woman has family members who are not documented, makes it very difficult to now go to law enforcement. What happens now? You go to law enforcement. A lot of people may not immediately, the first responders may not immediately be able to tell you this because the hotlines don't necessarily have a bilingual interpreter on hand. They don't necessarily have the information, validated by state as to how law enforcement will take care of your particular situation as someone who is a victim of domestic abuse, but also has the factor of undocumentation to deal with. In New York, the laws are different from New Jersey, bordering states, right? So it's very difficult to get this information. Also very difficult if you don't know English, right? Also very difficult if you know English, but you don't know complicated English. So all of these problems are now in your way, and you cannot say, oh, like the first point you made, Shuma, but like, oh, do they want to, speak out? Is there a resistance? The resistance exists once they start seeing all these obstacles, right? And yes, there is the cultural aspect, right? That will always be there, and still hasn't left. And there are other institutions within the Bengali community which speak to that. The Bangladeshi community in America is not a monolithic population. Just like the South Asian population is not a monolithic population. Indians have their differences from Bangladeshis, who have their differences from Pakistanis to Nepalese to so on, right? Just like that, within the Bangladeshi population, we see a lot of class division, a lot of ideological divisions, and they show themselves in different ways. So I want to speak in a way that's not offensive to too many people. So for example, those who are considered to be lower class or lower income, they will have certain kind of ideologies and act upon that in a certain way. Those who consider themselves to be elite consider themselves to have a different aspect of rules. But what they kind of don't speak to is the fact that regardless of this elitism or regardless of how they identify in class, the underlying toxic traditions that have been plaguing the community for this long exists regardless of socioeconomic status. And I think once we, like, for example, there's this rhetoric, right? ও এটা তো আমাদের এখানে হয় না, আমরা যাদের সঙ্গে চলাফেরা করি আমাদের মতন মানুষের সঙ্গে এটা হয় না, যারা একটু নিম্ন প্রকৃতির মানুষ হয়তো তাদের সঙ্গে এসব হয়. This kind of talk, this demeaning other people, thinking that you are somehow above it and beyond it, but this can affect everyone. So there's a lot of the social barriers that we have to really break through before we can get to like the woman and her true feelings about what she wants to do in her current situation. I hope I didn't rant too long. I hope that makes sense. You're muted, Shumabu.
Sorry. No, that makes absolute sense. I'll just want to ask you one more thing. So Maya brought a couple of very important issues forward, honor killings and other abuses and violent rituals in the name of misuse of religion. For example, we know that female genital mutilation, honor killing, those are forced marriages. Those are very relevant and very real issues in the immigrant community in England. and other European countries as well, in Netherlands, Sweden, and in Canada as well. We know that it has gone to such an extreme limit that in London, people had, like the government had to come up with a special police force to just deal with honor killing and forced marriage and that type of gender-based violence. So yet, sadly, we don't have, other than the community, sorry, organizations, we don't have any such initiative in North America. Would you like to say anything in that regard?
So we do have organizations, we have nonprofits who do provide bilingual services. I mean, my nonprofit is one of them. There's another amazing, so we provide services. BAFA provides services to like a socioeconomic population who is often underserved and are facing difficulties on a continuous basis. There's also other amazing organizations like Sapna, many others that are not, I'm blanking, but we have, but they are underfunded. They do not receive the amount of funding required. I think it's very important to consider this one thing. Funding for immigrant communities and situations like this require significantly more high skilled workers. And unfortunately, that's not something that we can just afford willy-nilly. And a lot of people will not do this kind of work voluntarily for their entire lives because they will experience burnout, right? So given that, very difficult to run an organization of this sort, right? In communities that really need it, right? Where, for example, the local politicians will not necessarily immediately come to your aid and provide the funding needed as a nonprofit organization, right? Because you would need money from like DYCD, you need money from other government grants. It's very difficult already when you're dealing, and who are the people who are doing this kind of work? People within the community. They themselves are not necessarily, championed to bring forth this kind of work, nor do they have the qualifications to do so. So it really is a butterfly effect. I think with regards to legal status, I know that even in like Bangladesh, right, the idea of marital rape, right, and this is not just in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, perhaps legally, they recently, very recently, are have considered the idea of prosecuting someone accused of marital rape, right? But we have to understand the laws that are affecting Bangladesh, those are the same people who are coming here with those ideologies, right? And so we have, of course, we have people in our communities in the US within the Bangladeshi population who then carry on these ideologies of like marital rape is okay, so on, so on. So I know those are two separate questions, but it's not too far-fetched is what I'm saying. So if you are coming from another ideologies that you want to hold on to, no matter how much support you're going to receive externally, those internal barriers are always going to be there, right? Which makes it difficult to step out of your norm, if you will.
Thank you, Shruti. Now we'll come to Ardiana. Until now, we have been speaking about going to the source of the issue and why it's important to go to the survivors and recognize violence, gender-based violence for what it is. Now we go to Ardiana, who has been working as a psychiatrist and who has been working with the survivors and knows firsthand what it is like to deal with the trauma and to what involves in the rehabilitation process. So Ardiana, if you could just share with us your experience a little bit about how it is and what's the most important aspect of this? What is the most important resource, to be precise?
Yeah, I've heard everyone, and it's kind of similarities are everywhere throughout the world. So it doesn't matter where you are. The women are simply disadvantaged in the society. In Kosovo, for example, they are integrated many Western lifestyles, and it's very superficial in that aspect, because no significant change has been done. And when it comes to gender-based violence, we have a very advanced legal framework and a advanced referral chain that, in particular, if you are a foreigner and you see it, you can think that it's the best country to live on. But when you live here and you go through the social protection system, well, is not that good. And as everyone was saying, it's really challenging to work with gender-based violence survivors and seek for appropriate support and accomplish their needs. We work mostly with minority groups like Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian communities. I think it's really hard being a woman in a patriarchal society generally, but when you are also minority community, it's even harder. One of the girls that Roma activists that we were working said once, imagine how hard it is to be a woman in this society. Imagine being a Roma woman. That is double hard to go through. Generally speaking, we have the entire social protection system functioning, but it's not a survivor-centered approach, and the trauma-informed approach is really something that we kind of dream of to have. Generally speaking, the cycle of violence, especially among minority communities, starts with early marriages and school dropouts and early pregnancies, and continues with domestic violence and economic violence. So it's kind of a cycle that is not really, it's a vicious cycle that is going on and on into generations, and nobody is taking, I mean, there are many of initiatives to prevent these forms of violence, but not effective ones so far to that level that we would like to see in the society. Usually, when it comes to families that report GBV incidents, it's not only one incident that we can talk to, but there are multiple incidents happening and multiple people involved. And this is something that makes things really complicated when addressing to the referral chain. Something that I would really like to point out is that the hidden cases remain as long as there is a strong fear of re-traumatization and re-victimization. The institutional authorities, because we were talking a lot about the family situation, which stands for every case, and I truly agree with that, but it's also the institutional approach, something that we really need to think of and start doing something to improve the system. Mostly when you talk to authorities that is responsible to offering a solution for victims, they are frontline officials who have gone through war not 2 decades ago. I mean, not all of them, but the trauma still exists. We are talking with people who have gone through burnout due to overload of cases, and who their work conditions are not really to the level that they need to support all the victims. So there are many issues that they present and really valid, but still we have people, we have women and girls especially, who are going through traumatic experiences on, and we do not have a system that is able to truly defend and respond and protect them. So still, this is something that is also really hard for people who work in this field, because the results are really hard to achieve, and you need a lot of work and challenges and to at least see some positive side to what you're doing. So I mean, this is more or less how it feels, and I think there are really similarities whenever you go in this regard.
Thank you, Diana. Now we'll go to the second part. Mithila, if I can ask you really quickly, I know you've been traveling and it's really late over there. Just quickly, the goal of this discussion is to come up with some concrete suggestions that we can take forward in terms of coming to solutions to the issues that we have. In terms of media, portraying those stereotypes of survivors, and um, I we think there's a lot of issues going on there in terms of building people's mindsets. Instead of creating sensitivity towards the survivors, the media often does the opposite. It often works to maintain the stereotypes. So, how do you think the media and even the journalists or the reporters can take an active part in like becoming more sensitive and themselves, and also creating a more sensitive audience towards the survivors?
Yes, I mean, as we all sort of agree, and we know that we live in a patriarchal world, and the degree is lower and higher in, it depends on context. But I feel like media everywhere, not only in Bangladesh, I would say if we talk about Bollywood, if we talk about Hollywood, like everywhere, uh, media also definitely normalizes gender-based violence. Not only that, they sometimes make it like look like very fancy. They make it look like very attractive, starting from teasing to harassing women to higher degree of violence. They easily normalize that. So I think media all over, normalizes violence. It is and mainly gender-based violence, and women are always portrayed in such a way that they're helpless, and whatever is happening to them, it is supposed to happen anyway. So the entire narrative and the in the the stories, the films, the TV commercials, everything is extremely patriarchal, and I would say misogynistic to some extent. Um, and there is a huge need of training people who are working in the media, starting and not only like filmmakers or story writers, but also who are working as journalists, because they have a huge responsibility. I always say that media is the mind shaper. So journalists, they have a huge responsibility in sort of in the prevention of gender based violence, or at least um, if we want to come out of the, or if we want to progress out of like patriarchy, if we want to reduce the degree of of violence, and in all that aspect, media has a huge role. But what we see, particularly in the context of Bangladesh, is victim blaming. Media always take, especially the newspapers, the news portals nowadays. Clickbait is the main thing. Like, they have to sell the news. So by selling the news, by only focusing on that, they're sort of becoming more insensitive. They are sort of the flag bearer of victim blaming, I would say. Media starts this in the first place. I mean, people start talking from their home, but media sort of give them the I would say, the give them the right, or give them the justify their action, and they then come out up in the public, in the social media, and they also start general people start victim blaming. So media, totally, it's the flag bearer of victim blaming, I would say, and it has a huge negative impact on the society. Um, and when if there is severe kind of gender-based violence like rape, they show the face of the victim. They talk more about victims background, victims family, victims this and that, and how they got like harassed, or how they got affected by the incident, rather than focusing on the perpetrator, rather than talking more about the perpetrator's background, rather than showing the face of the perpetrator more, rather than talking about the legal system that the perpetrator should go through. So I think it's really sad seeing that, and I think I mean, I've already mentioned that there's huge lack of awareness, and and there's also the with this focus on like selling the news or clickbait, kind of things nowadays that is happening, particularly in the era of social media. um, I think the organizations, the media organizations, they're also sort of desensitizing the journalists. They are incentivizing, selling gossips, or victim blaming. Um, because I know that a lot of since I also as an actress, I give like television interviews or newspaper interviews in the online news portals. I see how they like twist the phrases, and how they sort of come up with a very catchy but a very false headline, so that people just click on that. And by doing that, they are not only making themselves very insensitive, they're also sort of desensitizing the entire like general population. And it has become a trend now. So I feel like in terms of this gender-based violence, if we really want to do something about it, we need to intervene in the media. We need to provide awareness to not only journalists, but also like the writers, the directors, artists. I think there's a lot of work that need to be done when it comes to media. So I think I would I can go on and on and on, but yeah, I think I would like to stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mithila. Thank you for your candid view. So I think Sriti has something to add to that. Sriti, if you do.
I didn't have anything in particular, but I mean, since this is the free flowing kind of part of the conversation, something that I can definitely speak to is, so with regards to Mithila, I can see how she's like, you're dealing with more so media in Bangladesh and globally, but really, surrounding the Bangladeshi community. Of course, I can't speak to all media, but what I can speak to is, one second without getting in trouble. So is the media which exists and is responsible for getting the news around the Bangladeshi population in New York, in America. Now, some of them do fabulous work, but something that I've noticed within media, and and the reason I'm not targeting media specifically, it's more so the people who are responsible for these stories and the people who are responsible for the publications, right? There's a huge picking and choosing, like Mithila mentioned, right? And like this picking and choosing. So for example, we're having this conversation. This is not the most desirable conversation, right? For people to want to within the Bangladeshi context, media context, to want to publish. It's very, we're pointing out misogyny, we're pointing out, gender-based violence, and why. And the ideology is kind of like, oh, this is not, people of elite status of a polite society don't engage in this kind of conversation and rhetoric openly, it's ridiculous, yes. But what I'm trying to show is that this is the kind of ideology that works, and this will never be published, right? The kind of things that they pick and choose to publish are also coming from people who they pick and choose to be the face of the community. And this is very important because I think this is also a huge contributor to gender-based violence. A lot of the journalists who are dictating what goes out, what doesn't, are also men who are in their like late 40s, 50s, 60s. Okay, so these men are also carrying with them this deeply conditioned, misogynistic, extremely patriarchal, disgusting, and very low life kind of ideologies. And they pick and choose not only the men, but of course the women who they want to highlight. They're not going to highlight a woman who's going to speak out the way that I am right now, but they're going to highlight the woman who is the poster baby of what they would like for the ideal modern Bangladeshi woman to be in today's day and age. And that exists very much so. So I can speak to that, and I empathize with what you're saying.
So I think those of us who deal with media or reporting or has experience in journalism can all agree with you. Sadly, that is the reality. Now, if we can go into a slightly different area, Sumaya, you have indicated that there are legal issues when it comes to the women's rights in the Palestinian um, um, society. When it comes to the one of the issues that is very important and is very real and that needs to be looked at, and even women who have come abroad with their families and yet they suffer. And probably Ardiana can, I don't know if it's different in Kosovo or where you deal with the immigrant population in Roma women, if it's the same or not. But the custody of children, the custody to do with their mothers. Often it's always goes on the men's side of the family. Like the women are abused, they are battered, and yet when they try to leave, they're not even given the they're not given the basic right to have their children with them. So that is another reason why a lot of women from this immigrant population, they do not often come forward with accusation of being abused, because they fear that they're going to lose leave the custody of their children. So would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, actually, in the Palestinian area or in Gaza, especially, okay, there's a huge distance between the law and what's going in the real life. Because, okay, we have law, we have a lot of things, but very beautiful and give the women rights. But in practical life, you have no rights. So if you want, for example, if you have a lot of problem and you want to divorce, you have to think that you will lose your children. Even you have something from the court or you have the right to have the children, your man will do whatever he can to prevent you from seeing them or having them. So that's why, as you said, a lot of women think very much of talking about what's happening inside the family. If there's abuse, if there's anything, just keep silent, continue this life, because they don't want to lose their children. Also, it doesn't matter if this man is capable to take care of the children or he has money or whatever. Nobody will think about this. He is the man or he's the father, so he has a right to take the children, but you don't have any rights. So it's not about what law is there or what kind of law or what kind of power you have, but it's more about what the society decide, that the man, he is the father, so he can take the children, he can prevent you from seeing them. Actually, if I'm going to talk about myself, I came here 2 years ago, and until now I can't bring my children because I have still problem with my ex-man, and he doesn't allow the children to come here to me. So it's really very complicated.
We're very sorry to hear that, and I hope that that situation will be resolved very soon for you. Ardiana, if you could focus some light on that.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to point out that the socioeconomic element is the most important in this regard. If women would be economically empowered, probably most of the situation of domestic violence won't happen, or gender-based violence in general. So women usually who experience gender-based violence or domestic violence within their families, they are afraid that they won't have a place to live if they choose to report their case, if they choose to seek for assistance. There are domestic violence shelters, safe houses, but there are limited amount of time that you can stay. And also there are other criteria, for example, such as if you have a male child after over 12 years old, you cannot take with you. So there are many things that they take into consideration when they decide to report the case. And even if they go to the safe houses, after that time, they will need to get back to their homes. And then the recidivism and the violence repetition, everything goes on, and it's even worse for them. So this is the most of the cases. This is the most sensitive part when you see them and they know that there is a way out, but they also are really afraid to take that road, because I mean, speaking as mothers is really hard to leave your children behind, and I mean, seek a better life for you and them. But sometimes there are also hard choices that they need to take in this regard. This is something that, I mean, the socioeconomic element in this, especially among minority communities, is something that is evident, and it's influencing a never-ending cycle of violence.
I remember there used to be a very popular poster for violent gender-based campaign against gender-based violence in Canada that used to say that Canada is multicultural, so is gender-based violence. So I think we can say the same about today's session, that there are so many different cultures and communities across the globe, and so are different versions or different types of gender-based violence, but they're all violence nevertheless, and we need to recognize them. And regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of our cultures, our religions, it is important to notice and recognize gender-based violence for what they are. In recently, we have noticed a trend that when it comes to honor killings or forced marriages or female genital mutilations in Europe or in North America, there have been cases where authorities have been nervous or reluctant to step in because they're worried whether it's going to be seen as an intervention within people's right to practice their religion or their community's values and things like that. But when it's gender-based violence, I think we need to understand that when it hampers or when it affects one individual's human rights or basic human rights to survival or basic human rights to live, then we cannot even bring into consideration anything else. Beyond anything, it's a human rights abuse, and we need to recognize that. Sriti, you wanted to add something?
I think Shanti put the chat so I can read what she actually said. So yeah, so she stated that how can we fight against systems which exist in the society that are very barbaric and are obviously anti-basic human rights, since societal norms, religion, so on, has not really helped. What is it that we can practically do? Any tangible resources that we can possibly?
Exactly. So probably we need to, that is what I was going to say, that we need to think about ways in which we can go beyond these biases and we can bring in resources together, right? So I was wondering if you can suggest some resources like that.
So with regards to resources, I can definitely also just add, like, provide more to your page afterwards, in terms of tangible links and so on. But in terms of a suggestion that I would give to those who are watching and are in, the tri-state area in America, it's very important for some things to really begin within the home. And I might be sounding very cliche when I say that, right? I am not an authority figure, that I'm not a law enforcement authority figure, right? So the maximum that I can do is provide, a direction to intervention. So for example, in my organization, if you were to reach out to someone of my team, they can point you to city agencies that will then help you, and they can walk with you along the way if you do have linguistic boundaries. And I've done that in the past. I speak Bangla, so I can walk someone through the process of dialing several numbers to finally file a report if they don't want to go directly dial 911 and deal with that, right? That's one. Secondly, when it comes to raising your daughters, it's very important that you not make them super risk averse, right? Everything, as you raise a child, it's important that she understands her sense of autonomy. And that starts with small things, right? I know I'm taking this in a completely different direction, but from like a child developmental perspective, you take a girl to the park, right? Do not stop her from playing the way that she wants to play. Do not stop her from, taking the leap or using the monkey bars, as using the fire pole, as you wouldn't stop a boy, right? It really does start from a small age. Don't stop your daughters from experimenting and hurting themselves, because that's how they're going to learn, and that's how they're going to overcome this untangible fear that exists, and it's so irrational. Because what happens is that from that developmental stage, if they just continue getting this this feedback that they have to be careful, they have to be afraid, they have to be extra cautious, then that's exactly what they're going to do going forward. And there isn't going to be that courage that seeps in when they do need to step away, or when they do need to raise a voice. So in terms of raising children, I think, we're always talking about, oh, differently than girls. That's fine. How are you going to raise? Focus on that, right? And that gives the child a voice. Having the child understand what consent is gives the child a voice. Not forcing the child to communicate or hug or have any physical interaction with people whom she does not want to gives her a voice. So these things will prime the upcoming society. But there's also the problem, right? Who are you telling this to? You're telling this to moms and women who already have this ingrained in them that this is how, that they don't have that immediately, right? So something that I was thinking about a while ago, I don't know how, what you guys think of it, are like parenting seminars, like modules, community-based modules that are that are hosted for free. That's something I'm thinking that I might do in my community, where we have anywhere from like 10 to 12 women max, and we basically do parenting seminars where we kind of just talk about very basic forms of ideas about child development and its future implications. And through this very basic amount of parenting lessons, not lessons, but parenting discussions, and what would you call it? These very basic psychoeducation, if you will, right? I think Ardiana can probably speak to that. basic amounts of psychoeducation that can slowly like push the parent or the women and the men in the right direction. I think it's very important for fathers and men in the community to also be a part of this conversation, not just the women, because even if the women want to, as we've seen, if the father is not on board, if the men are not on board, it's just going to create this endless barrier. It's going to be very difficult to get through. So that kind of inclusion is what I would suggest and what I will probably be implementing. You're muted.
So we are almost, actually we ran out of time. So I'll just ask if anyone else has anything to add to Sriti, Somaya, or Diana.
Yeah, I would also, I totally agree that CDT is a very good summary of something really important, that is parenting lessons or discussions, which is also something that we do here, and try to involve as much as possible fathers, because with mothers is somehow easier, but with fathers is always harder to include in the groups, but it's something that it should be aimed, and especially not on how to raise girls, but also how to raise boys, because this is a very important part. Raising your children with gender equality norms is something that it's a must. And nowadays, especially with new parents, with young parents, that they can integrate these principles in their parenting styles. Something that what we did, and we think that it might work, is we have established these self-help groups in different communities, and basically they have been formed like naturally. These are the girls that do not want to respect the norms that the community has set for them, and they have sought for their independence, and they wanted to be educated and to continue their dreams. And these are the girls that are leading these groups, and they are taking as much girls as possible within these self-help groups to talk about and prevent early marriages and school dropouts, and see what can be done for a better future. I mean, these are some small initiatives, but if you are forming, for example, throughout the country, they sometimes have a real impact on people. So I think it should go to the community level, but also to the institutional level. We need to, I mean, these programs that we are developing, sometimes it seems that it feels that it's not really, you're not doing much, but sometimes when you see the long-term results, like in 10 years, you see that the protection system has really advanced to a scale that is, I mean, as much as you can do. But I think that these programs that we are providing should not end, but should try to focus themselves and develop as much as possible.
Thank you, Ardiana. And with that, we are at the end of today's event. But one thing I would like to just keep as a leave with everyone, if I may, that while it is the community's job, while it is the society's job to create that safe space where the survivors can come forward, and it is the state or the legal system's job to create that legal space where they can get justice, it is at the same time the job, before anyone else, the job of those parents, of that family, to create those individuals who will grow up. If they're men, they will grow up to respect themselves and the women in their lives, or whether they're, regardless of their gender, every child should grow up to respect themselves and to respect the boundary of other individuals as well. We often see that the parents don't respect the individuality or the boundary or the space or the private space of their children. They don't. In a lot of cultures, I can tell from the South Asian cultures, or even in a lot of Latin American cultures, African cultures, that private space of children is not respected. So what happens is that they grow up as individuals who don't respect their partner's private space or their individuality either. So we need to give that lesson from the very beginning, from their childhood. So I think family has a lot to contribute in that regard as well. If they respect themselves, only then they can learn to respect others in their lives. With that, we leave you with today's event. Thank you everyone for taking part and coming to us in spite of your busy schedule. And we invite our audience next week at the same time for our next webinar. Until then, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.